think I'm going to give Mr. DeShane a couple more minutes to show up. Maybe another minute or so. Hopefully it's just some of that lovely construction traffic we're having out there. No, I know, you want to scroll. There's your scroll. A little bit. Well, I think I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. And we'll go through our beginning and hope that Member Shane comes by the time we get into our new business. So, good evening and welcome to the Charter Township of Meridian Zoning Board of Appeals meeting. Today is Wednesday, May 17th, 2023. It is 6:33 p.m. and I will officially call this meeting to order. First up is the approval of tonight's agenda. I could get some movement. Yes. All right. I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda by Member Field Foster and motion of support by Member Trezise. Did I say it correctly?
Yes, you did.
Oh, I got it. Yes, I was quizzing myself in the car. All right. This is a vote to approve tonight's agenda. Vice Chair?
Yes.
There you go. See, you like that? I had to throw that in there. Member Field Foster?
Yes.
And Member Trezise?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, so tonight's agenda is approved. We will move on to our third item on our agenda, corrections, approval, and ratifications of the minutes from April 19th, 2023. And as I just read through them again, I will make a motion to approve those minutes as they are.
I will support.
Support by Member Trezise. Any questions, comments on the minutes? On that note, this is a vote to approve the minutes from April 19th, 2023. Member Koenig.
Yes.
Member Field Foster.
Yes.
Member Trezise.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, so those minutes have been approved. And number 4 on our agenda is communications. Keith, would you like to handle those during our packet?
Yeah.
Probably best handled. There are 4 letters that were received by the township in regards to tonight's case number 23-01. And I'm trying to stall as much as possible so that Member DeShane doesn't have to sit through Mr. Chapman's presentation again, but he's read the packet, so
Yeah.
maybe we'll get into it. Okay. That takes us to new business, which is ZBA case number 23-01, 6206 Columbia. Nikolai and Carol, I don't want to mispronounce your name. Arise check, thank you. Arise check 218 Berry Road, Hazlet, Michigan 48840. Mr. Chapman, take it away.
Good evening. So the applicant is requesting variances to create 2 new parcels. These parcels will be under the minimum lot width requirement of 65 feet at 6206 Columbia Street. The site is approximately 0.46 acres in size and is zoned RB, single family high density, and is also located in the Lake Lansing Residential Overlay District. So the submitted survey shows that The subject property consists of lots 14, 15, and 16 of Lake Brook number 1 subdivision that was platted in 1930. So those 3 lots are currently combined into one 20,037.6 square foot lot that has a total width of 120 feet on Columbia Street. There is an existing 816 square foot 1-story single-family home that was constructed in 1976 and is proposed to be demolished at some point. So the Lake Lansing Residential Overlay District states that lot area shall be consistent with the requirements of the underlying zoning district, except for lots that were created and recorded prior to October 5th, 1960. May be used for single-family residential purposes, provided the lot is not less than 5,000 square feet in area. An interior lot width shall be consistent with the requirements of the underlying zoning district, except for lots created and recorded prior to October 5th, 1960 may be used for single-family residential purposes, provided the lot is not less than 35 feet in width at the street line, and the minimum yard setbacks are maintained for the district where the lot is located. So these 3 lots were likely combined in the 1970s when the house was constructed. So they effectively lost their lot of record status. So the proposal is to create parcel A that would have 60 feet of lot width and parcel B that would also have 60 feet of lot width. A 5-foot variance is requested for the creation of both parcel A and B. And additionally, if you read the applicant's application, it references variance that was granted on the east of the subject site across the Virginia Lane road end. In 2017, ZBA case number 17-10-25-1 allowed the creation of 2 lots, which have 58.09 feet and 57.81 feet of lot width. The initial application was denied for the creation of 3 lots. And that's all I have.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Chapman. Would the applicant or the applicant's representative like to come up and speak on behalf of, you can come up to the podium here and just state your name and address for the public record, please.
Thank you very much.
Of course.
I'm Robert McCarthy, and I'm an attorney in East Lansing. My office address is 411 West Lake Lansing Road, East Lansing, Michigan. And I represent Carol Arischek, who's here with me today, and her son, who is the Nick Arischek, who is the personal representative for his father's estate. The title to the property is still in the name of Carol Arischek and her recently deceased husband, Gary. If you could pull up the plat, it shows the 3 original platted lots that were platted in 2013, and the highlighted in yellow, frankly not very well by me, but the highlighted in yellow area shows lots 14, 15, and 16. Adjacent to lot 14 is an unimproved lane depicted as Virginia Lane. It is the access lot for all of the back lot owners, and any construction on my client's property cannot and could not negatively affect Virginia Lane or that access, because my client doesn't own that property and couldn't obstruct it or in some other way stop the access for backlot owners by any construction on lots 14 and 15 and 16 on that property. That is at least one of the concerns raised by a letter that was submitted. And Virginia Lane is a right-of-way, part of the 1930s plat. My client has a house, which is a 1-story house with a walkout basement on it, on that property, which he intends to demolish if the variance is granted. The variance requested is to the zoning ordinance, which sets the minimum lot width at 65 feet, and we're asking that the 2 lots be approximately 60 feet in width, and The zoning ordinance 8637D2, which is quoted in my packet on Exhibit F, recognizes that a reduction to 60 feet per lot is possible with the approval of this board, where there are two adjacent lots. And I think it was designed, at least that language of the zoning ordinance was designed to accommodate for this particular unusual situation, which is the 1930 plats that had relatively close by current standard lot widths. In 2018, the Zoning Board of Appeals in the Bartow matter already referred to by Mr. Chapman granted a similar request, and the request that was granted in that case was a bigger request, or more property than my client is requesting now, at least slightly. And it was much closer to the curve that is shown on this property than my client's property, which is on a relatively straight portion of Columbia Street. And the concerns with regard to street usage and access are recognized by my client, but in fact, this particular property is on a straight portion as opposed to the curve, which might create more difficulties with regard to access than would be on my client's property. The addition of two driveways as opposed to one, at least in that section, is not going to be a significant change to the access for individuals on that road. It is 40 feet wide and not particularly, not the same as roads in other areas of Okemos or Hazlet, but that is what existed and has existed since certainly the 1930s for this property. There were 4 letters that were submitted in today's package, and 2 objected strenuously to the granting of this request, and 2, although expressing some concern, did not have any significant objection to the granting of this request. And those 2 objections are the properties on either side of my client's property. So they are the properties that are absolutely the closest to the Arischek property, and those are the 2 letters that did not have significant problems with the granting of this variance. While I'm sure the zoning board understands this, the Lake Lansing Residential Overlay District purpose, as expressed at the start of that portion of the zoning ordinance, says that at least part of the purpose was to address the development issues arising from existing lots created and recorded long prior to the adoption of the zoning regulations that we currently have in place. And I think that given the zoning issues that exist because of what has long been in place since the 1930s on this property, that this request is similar to a request that you've already granted, and frankly, less problematic than the request that was granted in the Bartow matter similarly by this board. And I urge the board to grant my client's request for a 5-foot variance on each of the 2 parcels as proposed. If there are particular questions, I'd be more than happy to address those.
Great, thank you, Mr. McCarthy. We will probably, as we get into our board time, call you back up to discuss that with us. I will now open the floor to public comment. I will just say that we are going to keep public comments to 3 minutes, and we just urge neighbors not to talk back and forth to one another during those 3 minutes. We want everybody to be able to be heard. We did receive those letters, and while we will absolutely consider, everybody's feelings in the neighborhood, we do have to take each case by case. So we do have some case law that Mr. McCarthy has brought up, but we do have to review each case individually as opposed to just going based on what the ZBA has done in the past. So I just urge everybody to keep that in mind and use your public comment time to express your opinion and not to backtalk with neighbors or talk back and forth with neighbors. But if anybody would like to comment on this case, you can come up to the podium and state your name and address for the public record, and you'll have 3 minutes, sir.
My name is Donald Winchell. I live at 6203 Columbia Street, directly across from this property, and I hope you approve it. I want you to approve it. The risk checks are great people. As you know, they've gone through a lot lately. Nikolai suffered a massive stroke when he was 36. Carol has had cancer, is just getting over it, and still got it. And the husband just died unexpectedly within the year. So they have got a lot of things going on. And I just hope, it'd be nice to have 2 new families across from us. Obviously, anybody that lives on the lake or near the lake thinks they own the lake. You'll get that universally. So you'll get that aspect of it. But I just hope that they can have 2 new homes there and then they can profit from it because they definitely need it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Okay, would anybody else like to speak on this case this evening? If so, you can come up to the podium and state your name for the public record. Okay, if not, we're going to get into our board time. So I'm going to go ahead and close public comment and open our board time. Does anybody want to get started? Yes, Member Field Foster, go for it.
And I'm not quite sure who this question.
Who to ask?
Yeah, who to ask.
Mr. McCarthy, would you like to come back up? Sure. Just so that makes it easier for us to be able to ask questions. If
Absolutely.
it's for staff or for representative.
So I just want to thank you for coming back up and for sharing all of this information. It's very helpful. One thing that I would like to make sure I am clear in understanding, so this was originally 3 separate lots.
It was.
And so the application says that the lots weren't combined. In our, in our information, it says that they were combined. So I'm trying to figure out what is the status of these lots.
Yeah.
Mr. Chapman's absolutely correct. They were combined. I couldn't find any
Some
statement
points.
where they were actually combined, but I don't have any doubts that they were probably combined at the time that this house was built.
Okay. Mr. Chapman.
Yeah, so we didn't find any record either of an exact date, but like I said, probably when it was built. Most of the time, if it's not, people combine them for tax purposes anyways to make it easier, so it's hard to say when exactly.
But as of now,
It
it
is.
is 1 lot,
One
not
lot.
3.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, I had the same question,
like,
so
okay,
I'm glad that we can clear that up because that was a little,
Yeah, I was,
yeah.
okay. I guess I have a couple of follow-up questions.
Yes, go ahead.
So we're combining this into 2 separate lots. So
It's combined, they're dividing.
we're dividing it into 2 separate lots. And so have there been any types of, I guess, studies or conversations to determine whether or not putting 2 houses on this property will cause any type of impact to the floodplain? Because as I was looking at the maps, it looked like, they're the floodplain. I'm not seeing it on this one.
Yeah, we
but
need, let's see if Keith can
Can you scroll
yeah,
into?
Scroll.
The
Yes.
plan is there, I see.
Yeah.
scroll us to,
There it
there we
is.
go.
The short answer to your question is I don't think any studies have been done on this. The floodplain, at least if we're looking at the same
Yes.
picture here, appears to me to only go out to a short way from Lake Leoncine itself. And the houses, if there were two houses built on this property, would have to be significantly closer to Columbia Street than to the lake. And it sure doesn't appear to me that there'd be any problem directly with that floodplain based on the floodplain picture that's in the packet.
Keith, do we know if that,
Yeah, so the floodplain itself is located at an elevation of 853 feet above mean sea level. We have an ordinary high water mark as our rear yard setback, so it would be 40 feet from that point, and that point is 852.29. So essentially where that floodplain is gonna be 40 feet from that is the rear yard setback. The existing house now is probably, this is just an approximation, 30 to 35 feet from the front yard. So, I mean, I think these lots are bigger than you think they are, so I think there's room there.
okay. I do have a couple more, but
Yeah,
I will. well,
no, keep going, keep going.
So, one of the things that I know in I read the Bartow
Sure.
case, and one thing that differentiates it is that there appeared to be support from the land bank from Ingham County to actually split the lot. Is there any type of outside support other than wanting to do this?
I don't have land bank support for this project, but there is some support from neighbors in the fashion that you've heard today and seen in the letters.
And so one of my other questions is, so there, in the letters and everything else, there's been a lot of talk as far as safety, determining whether or not there's any control over the houses that ultimately get built in this property. And so, and maybe this goes more to Keith than it does you, but in splitting it, knowing that there will likely be houses that will be built on this, do we open the door for having those individuals come back to do additional variances?
Yeah, so, I mean, right now, we're just looking at the lot being split. If the next step in the process, if this was approved, would be to submit a plan that shows a proposed house on the lot. Then that would be reviewed, and if needed, they would come back for additional variances.
Just kind of trying to follow the trail, because when we get to, is this the minimum? I want to know if we're at and being able to use it for permitted use. So that's all I have for at the moment.
Well, you asked all my questions, so does anybody else have any questions? Yes, Member
I've got
Trezise.
a nitpicky one.
Yes, please go ahead.
The deed you have provided only covers lots 14 and 15.
I appreciate that. I saw that as well. And I believe that there is another deed for the other properties, but we haven't gone out and got the title search to get the deed, which preceded the deed that you're talking about. But we haven't done that title search at this time.
So you think that the other was already attached?
Yes.
And then 14 and 15 was, okay. I'm assuming that the individuals own the property. I just was wondering.
They've been paying the taxes on it for a heck of a long time. Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. That's the only question I had going through the documentation.
All right. It's you or me.
I don't have questions, I just have comments.
Okay, let's hear some comments.
You want me to go first?
Yes.
Ms. Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
I understand the reason, the idea for wanting to split parcels. People split parcels all the time. And I also understand the need for requesting the variance due to trying to be fair to the parcel and split the parcel about as evenly as you can so that you don't have one that's, 80 feet wide and the other one's 40 feet wide, and you're really asking for a huge variance. So at least I can appreciate the fact that you did try to minimize the variance that you're asking to request. I did as well read the previous case and the case before it. So the first one with the 3 lots, and then the one that came back a year later after 2018. And I read through all the comments that the public had, and I read through the comments that the previous CBA had. I went out and did a site visit today, and I drove out there. And I can definitely tell and understand why some members of the public are worried about any other development being on there because of the road being very narrow. It's very curvy. It almost seems like it goes a little bit uphill. When you go down that road even farther to the south, it definitely goes uphill very quick. So I see the concern there. However, my opinion with that is, even when I read back through these previous ones, people have been, seems like, complaining about safety issues there for a while, whether it's pedestrians or it seems like it was the case. Unfortunately, there was a driver who was intoxicated that came close to hitting another house and wrecked, probably flying around that curb. There are no speed limits out there. There's no warning signs. There's no nothing from what I saw. I didn't check for street lights. I should have, but I didn't. I don't know if there's street lights out there to illuminate it. So it probably is there one? Yeah, it probably is, even without light, or lights plural, there probably is a little bit of a craziness of trying to be a pedestrian and walking through there. However, knowing that the case that's before us today, it seems to me, in my opinion, that the issues with traffic and with safety and that, these been going on for a while. So it would be, in my opinion, kind of unfair to press these issues on the current property owner in this petition because the issues are currently there. So if this property were to be split and the new owner decides if they're keeping one of the parcels to wreck this home, build another single family, they sell the other parcel goes to another single family, whatever those uses are, whatever permitted, it would be kind of beleaguered upon the township to kind of point our finger and shame on them that they're going to cause the issue. The issue's already there. They may be contributing to it more, unfortunately, but the issue is already there. So I would highly advise, if there's any members of the public here that have those issues and even created these letters, that it's a township thing. I think you would need to go to the township and say, look, there's some issues out there. They're building, they say we're going to build another house here. We're worried that there's going to be more cars on this road, albeit we don't know what that number is. You need to go to the township and argue your case that something needs to be put out there, whether it's more lights or a speed bump or even a speed limit sign or an arrow sign saying curve ahead, just to kind of warn drivers. And I don't know if there's enough right away. It looks like there maybe to put a sidewalk, but that's probably a far fetch from the township. If the township, or I don't know if it's a road commission that does that. But what I'm getting at, long story short, looking back at the safety issues, I don't feel the safety issues are necessarily going to be the fault of this outcome of this case, because they were previously there before this case was even heard. If this single-family house, if we deny this and the single-family house stays there, the issues are still there. That's what I'm getting at. The other issue that I have is with the previous case that was approved, the ZBA always goes back and forth on one of the big things. I think it might be criteria number 5, or it might be number 4. It kind of deals with setting a precedent. And I would be leery to, even though I understand the complaints, I would be leery to think about voting potentially against something like this, just because something like this has already been brought up. We heard testimony from the attorney. We read it in our packet. The township's already gone through something like this. and had a same type property within the same vicinity right around the corner that was split into one parcel into two parcels, and it was approved. And I just worry that if we were to deny something on this without having a very good basis, it could potentially set up to haunt us or potentially even a lawsuit because it's already been done. And I would want the homeowner, the parcel owner of this to come back and say, well, how come you let this guy do it but not me? Especially when we've heard testimony that their variance was actually more than what was being requested. And it was on the curve of the street, which is arguably the more dangerous part of the street, so on and so forth. So as much as I don't care for variances, because variances should be hard to get, you're asking to break the law, essentially. There are some variances that I've come before this board and I've flat out said at the beginning, I don't have a problem supporting this because of X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
So what I'm getting to is because of what I just mentioned in my testimony there with the current traffic problems that are not necessarily the fault of this property owner, and the splits similar to this has already been done in this vicinity, I would not have a problem supporting this. So I know there's other questions and comments, and
Yep.
I know the thing with the parcel and the lots, I have a planning background as well, so, the property owner's not coming to replat anything. And those original platted lots are there with 1930, none of that's changed. This is just the tax parcel that's changing, and people split those tax parcels all the time, unfortunately.
Yep. Yep. Thank you, Member Koenig, and Member Field Foster. Yes.
Just one point of clarification. Keith, we can't use the Bartow as precedence, can we? I mean, we look at each individual case as its
Correct.
own rather than,
Right.
so that would be my only point of clarification. They're each different. We look at them each as an individual. So in that respect, I'm not as concerned as of the precedence, so to speak, because we're not establishing a precedence.
Yeah, and I think that's an important clarification for our job, for all of us listening to the cases, that we as a board will come to different decisions, but important that we have those criteria for a reason. We have to take each case individually. I will say, I just pulled it up on Google Earth to look, and what I'm seeing, and I know we get a lot of cases in Lake Lansing overlay district. We just do. I mean, it's tough to build on the lake, and we understand and appreciate why. I mean, it's a desirable place to live. The lots platted in 1930 are really hard to build on in modern standards in 2023. These are very tricky lots to build on. And I'm looking at what I see, and these lots are close together. This particular parcel being split into two isn't, I can look at criteria number 5 in our criteria there and notice that, or I'm sorry, 4, and notice that this is not going to change the direct vicinity based on the fact that most of these lots, even looking at this picture, are skinny and narrow and long, and you've got to build accordingly to those lots. With that said, there's a really very large house right next door to 6206 that I'm seeing. There's another large house next to that. So I think that splitting this parcel up into 2 lots is not directly affecting the vicinity. I could definitely meet that criteria. So I am sensitive to, as Member Koenig, I think, very eloquently stated, that there are challenges on Columbia Street with the curve, with the amount of volume of new construction that's going in there. And just the sheer, everybody wanted to be on the lake, and with, the other challenges of that topography right there. But I also think that we're setting ourselves up for a tricky case to say no to something that is seemingly fairly simple. And I'm not really seeing a lot of reasons not to support this. So, if anybody has anything additional to ask or share? Yeah.
No, I would agree with both you and Mr. Koenig that the addition of another driveway is not going to greatly impact the traffic pattern on Columbia Street. When I went by there a number of times, looking at the lot is a challenge, shall we say. I'm not sure if you divide it, you can put two houses on there
Yes, it
anyway.
is.
But that's not before us now, and that's up to the owners. If they go through with this, I would suggest that they be looking at design before they do the demolition to make sure, and the unification, or the split, to make sure that they're not just building themselves. If they split it and the house is across the property line, something's got to change. If they don't split it, they've got a house and a lot they can build on with a little bit more ease. But if they want to build two lots on there, I would suggest that they do their research first to see if it's possible. Other than that, first time I looked at it, I didn't think this was a good idea, but the more I go by there, the less I can see as a reason to deny it. So I will support this.
All right. And I would agree with that. I think that's a good point to make, is that we are only talking about splitting of the parcel. This still, variance granted or not, if it's going to be buildable, would be something that to take into very close consideration. You would have to definitely work with the building and planning department to really come up with, and again, what if it were to come back before us, then that's a different case altogether. So we would have to take that case individually from splitting this parcel. So I think that that's wise to take into consideration what is going to be built there, if it's possible to build there, what that looks like, keeping within the floodplains, keeping within the setbacks, and satisfying those requirements to have actual buildable lots. I think it's going to be challenging here if this is two lots. Yes, Member Field Foster.
And this may be outside the scope of this variance, but I mean, we know based on the application that whatever is done, the intent is to ultimately put two new houses on this property with obviously driveways. So my question, and again, this may be outside the scope of what we're doing, but if two houses go here, is there the ability to require that there's a shared driveway?
So that would be up to the Ingham County Road Department and our ordinance actually as well, which doesn't permit shared driveways, so.
Just trying to.
Right,
take up
how to
less,
minimal,
but
yeah, how to minimize, how to minimize. But that's for a different case. I mean, the unfortunate thing is that's not ours to decide at this moment. Well, if nobody on the board has the objection, I'm going to start reading the criteria, and by all means, if something strikes you, let me know. Criteria number 1 is unique circumstances exist that are peculiar to the land or structure that are not applicable to other land or structures in the same zoning district, and these unique circumstances are not self-created. I actually think Member Koenig did a great job of highlighting how these aren't self-created circumstances, that the issues that may be present here have existed for quite a while. And that this is a pretty unique circumstance considering we're looking at 1930s plotted lots and 3 different lots combined into one at some point with no rhyme, reason, or paper trail to follow them. But I do think that unfortunately for the Lake Lansing Overlay District, every single one of these lots is unique in some way, shape, or form. So I can meet that criteria. I can meet unique circumstances easily. Criteria number 2 would be strict interpretation and enforcement of the literal terms and provisions of this chapter would result in practical difficulties that would prevent the owner from using the property for a permitted purpose. this is the tricky one. Practical difficulties is always the tricky one. So I can even leave that to the side for the moment, because I believe that I can meet criteria number 3, which is granting the variance as the minimum action necessary, which would carry out the spirit of the zoning ordinance, secure public safety, and provide substantial justice. I do think in creating lots that are evenly split with only a 5-foot variance on either side was as minimum as we could get as far as this variance application goes. I think that, looking at what we have, that it was the best way to divide up this lot. And certainly the minimum action in this particular case. So I can meet that criteria. Any questions on that one, or anybody on minimum action? I know that's Member Field Foster and I tend to get stuck on that one in practical difficulties.
I go back and forth. I mean, which is why I was asking some of the questions.
Yeah.
Because
it's got to move forward too.
Because at the end of the day, it's like, you always want a property owner to be able to do with their property.
Yeah.
It's their property,
their
they paid
property.
for it.
Right.
And so, my first thought was, well, the minimum action is basically leaving it as it is, because you can use it. There's a house on it. So obviously it is usable as it is. Then I get to the provide substantial justice, which brings me back to a landowner should be able to use their property. And as Member Koenig indicated, the issues that are there in that neighborhood are things I think that perhaps the township or the road commission should deal with as far as signage. I have been in this neighborhood, so the roads are tight. It is curvy. I mean, it's a Lake Lansing issue that comes up. So I'm back and forth,
Yeah.
honestly, on this one. So
On minimum action or on,
on minimum
Practical
action.
difficulties.
Well, practical difficulties we skipped. for
yes,
now.
for the moment. Member Koenig had a comment.
Yeah, I was just going to say that splitting the parcel isn't the variance. The variance is being requested as the foot, just the minimum foot of the width of the lot.
Of the width of the lots.
So in my eyes, the minimum action is just what I mentioned before. It'd be different if the applicant or their representative came and said, I'm going to create 2 lots with this, or I would like to create 2 lots. One's going to be 40 feet wide, one's going to be 80 feet wide, and requesting a variance of 25 feet. To me, I'm sure members of the board would say,
Yeah.
one's too big and not too big, but over the size, and one's under the size of the minimum width. So by splitting that parcel, or proposing to split that parcel right down the middle and having equal, to me, that represents the minimum variance, because then your variance is basically minimized on both sides, instead of having one really large and one really big, if that makes sense.
It does, but that would still entail splitting the lot.
It does.
So, I mean, the variance is splitting the lot and creating,
Well, I think what Member
no,
Koenig is
I-
pointing out that it's not, we're not granting them the variance to split the lots. We're granting them the variance. They're
the
going to split
variance
the lots.
of
The variance
on the
is.
They're not
sides.
approving whether they can split the parcel or not.
Right.
The township has procedures that allow people to split parcels. It's the variance of the actual widths of the new parcels being created.
Okay,
That's what I was getting at.
No, I got
Minimum
that.
variance would just be the
the 5.
5 feet or
5
whatever
feet.
it is, 5 point something and 4 point something, I think is what you had. Pretty close to 5 feet on both of them.
Yeah, and I think if they went ahead with the split without the variance, they'd end up with 2 lots that didn't meet
they couldn't
the
use.
requirements. And then if they came back, it would be their doing that created the need for the variance.
Right.
So,
And then it's self-created, then it
Yeah.
becomes self-created. So they're doing the right thing by asking, which is, something also that I think that we have.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Yeah, because of whatever happened in the 70s,
Something
Loose
happened.
rules were happening in the 70s, obviously created some of the conflict that we have before us today. Yeah. that said, I do find that to be the minimum in this particular case, the minimum action in this particular case. I mean, for what we have, they have, a total of 120 wide lot.
I can give them that.
Yeah. Okay, oh wait, did you just agree to that? Did you just agree to the minimum action?
I did. I was like,
Minimum action. Okay, I'm gonna move on to criteria number 4. Granting the variance will not adversely affect adjacent land or the essential character and the vicinity of the property. I think I stated earlier that just in looking at the neighborhood, and I know several of us have driven by and made site visits, and even just looking at it now to just, I do feel that with the wave of new construction in Lake Lansing, I think that this fits in with what's happening in that overlay district right now. I do very much understand the concerns, especially with the traffic. And I hope that is something, and I wish that Member DeShane was here tonight, because that's something we can take to the board. But obviously, Member Trezise can take that to planning and say, what are we doing in Lake Lansing? Because we ask them all the time, especially regarding Lake Lansing. That is something that, as a body here at the ZBA, we've asked a lot of questions about what's going on in Lake Lansing Overlay District, because we have concerns as well.
I can tell you that the director of the planning department has indicated a need to look over
Yeah.
the overlay district and possibly change some of the
Yeah.
stuff there, because it's almost as old as the original plat when you really think about it.
Right.
From a practical standpoint.
Right.
It's been on the books for a long time, and situations change.
True. And how do we protect the lake and protect those
right.
floodplains and
Everything we're
protect
dealing here
the environment
also has to
all
go
the
through
same time?
the county commission and drain commissioner and
Yeah,
all
the
that
road
stuff.
commission,
So,
drain, yeah.
road commission and all that, so we
Yeah.
are rather limited as to our scope.
Yeah. Well, what we can do, right?
Yes.
So it is something, so for neighbors and for community members, that is something that I know that we have asked for the planning commission to take a look at, we've asked for the board to take a look at, because we do get a lot of Lake Lansing cases, that it would be nice to have some solutions for neighbors and residents to be able to rest easy knowing that this is what was standardized, this is why, and kind of, make it easier to own and also easier to renovate as necessary within those restrictions. So that said, I can meet criteria number 4. Criteria number 5 would be granting the variance will be generally consistent with the public interest and the purposes and intent of this chapter. And I do agree that as I look through the new builds within this neighborhood, I feel like this is, and the size of the lots in this, if we're looking strictly at splitting the parcels, when we're looking at this plat map and we're looking at the size of these lots, 6196, 6192, 6190, 6174, all of these lots look to be about the size of what, if not a little smaller than the size of what 2 lots would be here. So I do think we're in the general character of this neighborhood, and that it's consistent with what the township is trying to do with the Lake Lansing overlay district. So I can meet criteria number 5. But that still leaves us with criteria number 2, which is the strict interpretation and enforcement of the literal terms and provisions of the chapter would result in practical difficulties. Yes, Member
I can
Trezise.
try to address that from my
Yeah.
standpoint.
Thank you, I would
That is,
appreciate that.
While technically the overlay district does not apply because these lots were combined at some point, the intent behind the overlay district is to encourage improvement of the housing stock around the lake and to utilize it as a residential. And I think overall, this does that. Again, if we said strictly imposing only the zoning laws, then then that wouldn't apply. But I think it shows an intent that has been adopted by the township over the last number of years that would encourage utilization in a reasonable manner, and I believe this meets that criteria.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. I think that is what the overlay district intends to do, is to make it buildable, to make those older homes be able to be renovated and or
Upgradable, I think,
yes.
is
Yeah,
another way to look at it.
upgradable. There you go. Yeah, Member Koenig, go ahead.
And to build off what Member Trusai says, the wording on these things are very tricky sometimes. I can see why you get caught up on that minimum action necessary. It's difficult when you read some of these things. I take building off what he said as well, when I look at the parcel, I take the strict interpretation and enforcement of the terms of the zoning code saying that every parcel in this area has to have a minimum width of 65 feet. So if they want to split this parcel, they can't meet the 65 feet. Interpretation of the code says, oh, you just can't split the parcel. And I don't think there's anything in the code that precludes people from being able to split the parcel. There is a process there that allows for homeowners to split parcels. Like I said, it's done all the time. So in my opinion, building off what he said as well, strictly enforcing the code basically wouldn't let this property owner split that parcel because they don't have a way of making two parcels with 65-foot minimum widths. One could be 80, but again, you go back to the 40, you're still in the situation having to request a variance. So when I read that, that says to me, code's a little strict, it wouldn't allow them to split the parcel, and that's what they're asking for, is to split the parcel. There's nothing that precludes them from doing that.
It's true. It's true.
That was helpful. That was.
Yeah.
But he made a very good point as well,
Yeah.
about the history of
Yeah.
the overlay district and the intent of these. I remember, I believe it was one of the previous chairs.
Yeah.
Mentioned the intent in one of the older cases as well.
Yep. I think that, yeah.
He mentioned
Chair
exactly what he
Boucher.
said.
Chair, I did for sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which
Sounds like
makes
him.
sense.
Yeah,
Yep.
I did. Those were good points.
Yeah, well, I can meet criteria number 2. I believe criteria number 2 can be met with looking at the practical difficulties based on what both Member Koenig and Member Trezise have just so eloquently stated that hopefully will be reflected in the minutes properly. That said,
I would move approval
Okay.
of the variance request.
all right. And I would support that, the approval. So this would be a motion to approve the variance for ZBA case number 23-01. So discussion on the motion on the table.
Just a comment.
Yeah. Member Field.
So I will support this. However, I raise just the question, concern that I think it goes towards something Member Trezise was mentioning, that this will be hard to ultimately put, I think, 2 houses and driveways on. And as a result of that, I foresee, not that it would happen, but that this will come before us again. So I don't particularly look forward to that.
The only thing I would say to that is the lots are large enough to build upon. It may put some constraints on what they can build upon it, but it is possible, I believe, looking at what we've got here, that building could occur. It may not be what they want.
No, I absolutely agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. But I guess to follow up with that is we have had several, Lake Lansing cases. And so that just goes back to the hope that Meridian looks at the overlay and, makes the necessary adjustments so that as people are moving into these lots and remodeling and building new construction, that we are definitely taking in consideration the concerns of the residents that are there, as well as the ability to keep up with the, new and improved, versions that people like to put on their property. So yes, definitely would be buildable. I think it'll be hard.
So cautionary.
Yeah, it's-
Cautionary tale, it's, and to come before us with that is pacing, what is the minimum requirement for
So,
variance? It's important to know, just as moving forward, I think that's just some wisdom that we can share as a board, that when building here, it is going to be challenging. And if this is a case that comes before us, we do definitely look for how minimal, those, how small we can get those requests for setback, and such, so. Yep.
And I do appreciate Member Trezise and Member Koenig's comments throughout all of this. It was helpful.
We appreciate yours.
This is a good planning background type
Yeah,
of a case
definitely.
with the
Definitely.
lots and the parcels. So, all right, well, on that note, I'm going to go ahead and call a vote. This would be to approve the variance for ZBA case number 23-01. Member Koenig.
Yes.
Member Field Foster.
Yes.
Member Trezise.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, so your variance has been approved. And I would just leave that with the caution of, making a really smart decision going forward as far as what happens with these parcels, taking the neighbors into consideration, taking into consideration those pretty strict code that is there in the ordinance, and trying to avoid coming back to see us if at all possible. We have excellent people in our planning department, so they should be able to help get that down to not have to come visit us again. That would be great.
And I appreciate your concern.
Yeah, thank you. And I will, looking at the agenda, we have no other business, and we have, so I will go to public remarks, and anyone also is welcome to come up at this time and make a public comment. Sure, and we would just ask name and address for the public record.
Michael
please.
Harvey, 6216 Columbia. The discussion between parcel, lot, and tax bill, I look at them as three different things. You seem to be calling, when a number of lots are together on a tax bill, you're calling that a parcel. To me, parcel is described land, not platted lots put together. It may be a parcel for the tax sense, because a parcel that's platted land, or not platted land, described land is one tax bill. My understanding. I have seen many lots sold off one at a time from a tax bill to an individual. That person then comes in. So theoretically, there could have been they could have sold all three lots. So I don't think I agree with what you're doing. I'm just saying that you went through an awful lot of work to get there.
Yeah, yes, we do. We want to be as thorough as possible.
Yeah.
Not only for our sake as representatives of the township, but also for the communities and for the
Yeah, well,
applicants.
There can be lawsuits from either side.
Right, and that's what we would love to avoid. We would love to be as thorough as possible to avoid any further challenges, so. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Harvey. Anybody else? All right. In that case, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment, and I will open board member comments. Any board member comments for the evening? All right. Well, on that note then, this meeting is officially adjourned, and we'll see you all in June, I believe. Maybe not. Maybe not. Okay, we will not see you in June. Enjoy Celebrate Meridian then in June. Instead of being here, we will have a good time.
As
at
of
the
right
festival.
now, no, but that could change
Okay.
before Tuesday.
Okay.
So that's the submittal deadline.
Okay. Oh.